but about how they can live out their true identity without maybe parents knowing about certain things, right? Because that's who they are. Parents will get in the way and stop children from becoming who they are. We need to fix that problem early. I could go on forever. Politicization, right? Everything becomes political. You see this. There's no sphere of American life today that is not political. There's no place where I can go to the Eagles game and I don't care what your politics are. We just shake hands and we love the Eagles because we're Eagles. This was a good thing for American culture, that we had places that were not political. Very good. That's gone. Everything is now either oppressing people or you're either overthrowing the oppression or keeping it in place. So sports, politicized. Corporations, completely politicized. The family, politicized. Everything is political. There's no safe space that's off limits to completely throw off, because everywhere there's going to be tools of things that keep people from living out their true self. So we have to take over every sphere. Government, of course, expands and expands and expands the power and the role of the government, because we need to make sure there's nothing anywhere that will hold back me from living out my true self. History, how do we view history? History is no longer something helpful or useful to learn from. History is just a story of people oppressing each other. So it's not really wise to study history for any value of learning things. It just shows more oppression. So hopefully you can just see some of these things in action. Free speech. Speech is no longer something that we value. If the self is psychological and internal, when you speak a disagreement with who I am, you're actually killing me. You're harming me. You're hurting me. So people say, you're hurting me, and we say, well, I didn't touch you. I'm just speaking. Well, in this worldview, if to be human is to be psychological, if you disagree with them, you are harming them. The law is starting to recognize these psychological harms. It has for a while, because this worldview is creeping in the law everywhere. Law is no longer something that is external, objective, that everyone must conform to, right? The idea of a neutral principle of law. Everyone must conform to the same standard. That's oppressive. What if that prevents me from becoming myself? The idea of law itself is being destroyed and instead being used as a tool, a political tool, to accomplish ends to enable this worldview. Medicine, right? The last hope, you would hope, of some truth, objectivity, science is gone. I say gone, but largely. Medicine is no longer about curing people. That would be oppressive. It's about affirming who they say they are and prescribing or giving them procedures to become who they are. Because who you are is your gender identity, not your biology. And if this is who you say you are, sure, how dare I not prescribe you, hormone blockers, you name it. I'm getting ahead of myself. Medicine, completely shift on its head. I'm not saying every doctor believes this, but this is the worldview. You can talk to Mark, that's even taking over the medical field. All right, let's look at the worldview in action, and then we'll talk about the worldview and how it contrasts to the biblical worldview. Here's a quote. Let's be clear. This is life-affirming and life-saving healthcare, she declared. When our children tell us who they are, it is our job as grown-ups to listen and to believe them. That is what it means to be a good parent. This is the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, after the Minnesota governor signed an executive order that would force all state agencies to protect gender-affirming healthcare, including surgery. Let's unpack the worldview behind this statement. Hopefully you see Rousseau right in this statement. Human nature is good. It can be trusted. So when children speak something, it must be right. You can see identity is psychological, right? Whatever I feel, believe about myself is who I am. So if I say I'm a girl, my parents need to believe me, right? Because that's who I am. The self is psychologized. You see Rousseau. Now, let me just stop for 1 second. Put on your thinking caps. If this is the worldview, at what stage of life are humans most human? Does that make sense? Based on this worldview, when are humans the most human? When they're children. When they're young. When they're immature. But stop for a second. A child born good. Nature is good. the longer I grow up in society, the older I get, the more I'm influenced by culture, by religion, by parents. The more I am conformed to the image of something external. I won't even know it, but it just will happen as I get older. I'll fall into the patterns of conforming myself to the world. But the world is what corrupts. So children are actually the most, in this worldview, authentic, trustworthy humans. And so, of course, when children say they are a girl trapped in a boy's body, wow, we better listen to them right now. Because if we let them get to puberty, they're going to not be able to become who they are. We will stop them from living out their true selves. We have to intervene now, immediately. Human nature is good. We trust it. They've told us, okay, this is true. We better act immediately. You see Rousseau dripping here. You see Nietzsche affirming that there's no universal human nature. It doesn't matter. Boy can be a girl can be a boy. There's no standard. Whatever you say, you can be anything. You can create yourself in your own image. There's no standard that governs, right? You see Nietzsche. You see Marx, the categories of oppression. Of course, we see Freud. What it is to be human is primarily sexual, right? That's what we see today, whether it's living out sexual fantasies or changing your gender. This is what it is to be human. This is your primary self. To find your gender identity, understand who you are, and then live it out. How do you live it out? Well, technology will set you free. We can give them surgery. We can give these children surgery, puberty blockers, hormone blockers now to make sure they can become who they really are. And of course, we see Marcuse and Wright. We see the politicization of sex. Now, here is a very benign statement, right? If we have the government forcing this, first, forcing these surgeries, procedures, but then you have a subtle statement to parents. What it is to be a good parent, according to the state, is to affirm your child's gender identity. Now, there's no threat here, but just look at legislation that's popping up everywhere. California, Oregon, Colorado passed it yesterday, Washington State, I didn't count all the states, where if I live in Texas, and Texas has said, hey, no, any parent, any doctor, anyone who prescribes hormones, puberty blockers, surgeries to children, you commit a crime. Okay, that's that state. Well, if that child flees to California because they're being oppressed, they're being prevented from becoming who they are, the state of California now has a law that will say we will step in and exercise authority to become the parent, and we then can prescribe the child without parental knowledge, consent, surgery, hormone blockers, puberty blockers, you name it. Now, Lord willing, those laws will be struck down as unconstitutional. That's getting outside the scope of our discussion. There's lawsuits challenging them right now. But of course, the state has to stop the family from preventing the children from living out who they really are. Because who they are is what they say they are. It is good, it is trustworthy, their gender identity is sexual, this is who they are. And now we must use the power of the state to make sure their identity can be lived out to the world. Every worldview has a lot of questions to answer. I've deduced 5, right? You can break these down however you want. Every worldview must answer what are humans? They must answer what's the purpose of humanity? Why do we exist, right? What's the problem with the world? Everyone knows there's some problem with it, even if they get the problem wrong. Then you got to answer the question of what's the solution to the problem? How do we restore the purpose of humanity and get humans back to flourishing? And then, just sort of another aside, how do we know something is true? Again, this is just my attempt to every worldview answers these questions. So let's just talk. What is, summarizing human nature? Human nature is, and I'm going to ask you guys to answer the biblical, right? What is the gender identity, expressive individualism worldview, right? Of course, human nature is plastic, can be shaped in any image you want. Create yourself, right? We trust human nature. It is good. And human nature is psychological and sexual, right? We've covered these things. That's according to this worldview. That has given us the statement, I'm a man trapped in a woman's body, and now makes a lot of sense. I know I talked for a while and I traced a lot of philosophers, but hopefully you can see the development that is definitely the worldview of most people today walking around who just take these things for granted. They don't even think twice about human nature being good, that who they are is what they feel. These things are embedded in our culture. What is the biblical worldview?
Man is free, man in God's image.
Okay, you start here. Image of God. Like this is drastically opposed. Something external gives us identity. Something outside of ourselves. We are supposed to reflect His image, not our own self-creation, right? Male and female. Alex talked about this. This is part of our image in God. Male and female. Go ahead, Beth.
And not only are we supposed to reflect, we do. We, without trying.
Amen.
We do.
It's our identity. Good. Exactly right. We can't not. What else?
Human nature is sinful.
We can't be trusted. We don't trust our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings. We're corrupted. We believe in the fall. I mean, this is diametrically opposed to the worldview of today. These basic questions, but when you build on them, you can get to the point easily, quickly, of a man trapped in a woman's body. It's logical, actually. But if you start with these different presuppositions about, wait, no, we don't trust our internal desires, it's a completely different end result. What about the purpose of humanity? Right, I'll just summarize what we've talked about, an expressive individualism. Purpose, define your own identity, live it out to the world, create yourself in your own image, express this outwardly. Oop, I pressed too many times. What's our purpose? Right, as Christians, as people created in God's image, what's our purpose?
Glorify God.
Okay, we exist to reflect Him and to glorify Him, to make Him known. How does that contrast with the expressive individualism worldview?
I'm not the center.
I'm not the center. Pretty drastic, right? And what is the whole purpose of the worldview? To glorify who?
Self.
The self. That's it. To glorify the self, right? Obviously, there's the dominion mandate. What else? What's our purpose?
Love. To love
To
others.
know
Yeah,
Him, make
to-
Him known.
To know, I mean, you guys are, yeah, exactly, right? To express God's love to others, to bring His kingdom. It's outward centered, right? We're taking it to others and bringing them in instead of me living out my identity and make everything conform to my reality, right? It is so diametrically opposed. We are to bring His kingdom instead of our own kingdom. What's the problem with the world? Well, in gender identity, expressive individualism worldview, it's everything external. The problems are external to me. The systems, the religions, my biology. These things prevent me from becoming myself. I'm good. They corrupt me. They conform me to their image. Objective truth claims, hey, how dare you say that there's only male and female? That is oppressive. That's what's wrong with the world. People like you who say this. It's always external. What's the biblical worldview?
We're fallen.
So where does the problem lie?
Inward.
Diametrically opposed. It doesn't mean there's no problems in systems. Systems get screwed up too.
Because systems are created by people.
Yes!
We're screwed up.
But the problem starts internally, right? It is sin that is internal. Where does the cure need to happen first here, right? It has to start inside. You guys get this? This is the problem. It's diametrically opposed to the worldview of expressive individualism. What about the solution? Right? Well, for the gender identity expressive individualism worldview, it's to live out your own identity. Figure out how to do it, however you can. We need to create a world then where there is a society that enables everyone to truly live out their true selves. And that, of course, can only happen through destruction of all things that oppress, right? That's going to be politically, it's going to be culturally, corporate, you name it. It's just going to be slowly working to create a society where I am not inhibited in living out myself. Yep, go ahead.
Is it too early?
No, it's not too early. This is the time to talk to this.
Okay, so anything that gives order, even how to enter a room or set up your spice rack in your kitchen, anything that gives order could be construed as
It's amazing you use that example,
oppressive.
but yes, I read an article. Maybe you read the same article.
I don't think so.
This was on the racial side, and that's it. But it's the same worldview. But the author said, "How dare this person put a picture of a spice rack up?" That was a tool of oppression to show how organized and orderly the white women's life were compared to the black woman. And so it was a tool of oppression in the 1850s. So I use that to say, yes, everything, and this is, you're slowly, it's so far afield that people are taking the worldview to their logical conclusions. We can't discipline children in school anymore because then we're making them conform to a standard. Anything orderly, we're slowly seeing that now. People sometimes have a hard time taking their minds to their logical conclusions when the truth is so far against it. But some people just keep going, which is why we have a man trapped in a woman's body. When you take the worldview we traced, you get there. And so yes, I think you're spot on. That was a long answer, but it's amazing that you use that example. Yes, a spice rack is oppressive.
But even anything on the left, even the solutions proposed on the left side of your screen are structural. There's going to be
Somebody's structure.
That way. You have to do it this way.
Right, yeah.
Well, the new this way is also a structure.
A structure, a society, yeah. What about the biblical worldview? What does human flourishing look like?
Loving God and loving others.
Yep, be reconciled to God. Right? Deny the flesh. Kill the self. Be conformed to His image. It is the exact opposite, right? External standard redeems our true identity, restores the image of God, resolves the problem of sin. This is what it is to have a flourishing society. And then in society, we bring the kingdom. We love, we spread, we bring others into the truth of the knowledge of God, right? Well, how do we know something's true? Well, we look inward, right? In the expressive individualism worldview, look inward. There's no objective truth. Whatever I say about myself and about the world is what is true. Truth is subjective. Live your mantra, live your truth. You hear that? That is just dripping with expressive individualism. Don't like that statement on Facebook when someone posts it. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit too heavy application, but
Is
that
this
statement.
also, I'm living my best life? Is that what that is also? I mean, people are saying that.
Yeah, because whenever I get to live out who I am. What about the biblical worldview? Truth and authority.
There is
Jesus is the truth.
This is, literally, if you think of this, it is a religion. It's a worldview. I am who I am. This is God's statement, right? He's the only one who's not dependent, not on something else. He just is. There's so much wonderful theology in that statement. This worldview is evil. It's pure evil because it says I am who I am. It's the ultimate idolatry of self. Whatever I say is true. It is the I am who I am moment that we are living out in society. It's objective, knowable, equally applicable. Truth is external. We conform ourselves to it instead of making the world conform to ourselves. We have a few minutes left. We're going to have time for discussion in the fourth class. What questions? What comments? Where was I not clear? I know there's a lot of philosophy and history. Again, don't worry about those things. If you just can trace the worldview, even if you just go back through the big points of the worldview and don't remember the philosophy, that's fine. I hope you see, though, this has been happening for a while.
Oh, yeah.
We're just living the latest outgrowth. What will be next? I don't know. But the trans worldview, the trans movement is a logical conclusion of the beliefs of society that have slowly just woven themselves away into the common person's psyche over hundreds of years.
It's basically just all going back to idolatry.
Yeah. Romans 1. Idolatry. That's why go read Romans 1 again. Suppress the truth. That's where we started in Romans 1. And there. What other questions?
Well, it's interesting that, they say the kids have their, their ultimate truth, but they learn that they're trapped because of what society tells them, peer pressure, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit, maybe next class, about this social contagion that conforms. Yeah, no, that's a very good thought, Stephen, and you're previewing perhaps the next class. So look at my wife.
Go ahead.
Comment, yeah, questions, comments.
I was gonna say, it's interesting though, because most of us here have lived a little bit of time. And it's interesting because I can see what has happened in the past. And it's also interesting the way Satan goes, oh, let me grab this, but I'll just touch it gently. Oh, they don't like that. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, let me cut a little bit further. Okay. And it's just interesting the way
Sure.
you can see if you look through the past, they go one step, oh, they didn't like that. I'll come back a little bit.
New method.
Yeah. Yeah.
Katie?
My question is, if they're, like the California thing, if they're protecting certain laws for children, how do they on the converse side, if they're having a child sex slave, protect them at that point? Like, do they throw certain things out the window?
Well, I think that's the next step. Simone de Beauvoir, I read a little bit more about her. She, the one who separated sex and gender, she actually advocated for pedophilia because she saw the logical consequences of her worldview. She wasn't afraid to say it. She got her license revoked because she had sexual relations with one of her students. Because she said, children are authentically human. How dare we hold them back? So right now, pedophilia, the book that I sort of summarized talks about this. It's still so hard for people to digest that. But 10 years ago, it would have been really hard for people to digest, I'm a man trapped in a woman's body. Now if children can change their sex, of course they can engage in sexual relations. It makes no sense to say they can consent to this, but can't consent to that. I don't think it'll be that long. We're already seeing it slowly, but enough of the population, it's still they know this is wrong, even though it's inconsistent with the worldview. It's coming.
I saw an article yesterday where they came to that conclusion in either California or Washington.
Here you go. Martha?
Which book did you use?
It's by Carl Trueman. It's 400 and some pages, so it's a long slog. That's why I tried to summarize it. Carl Trueman, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. If you're on the app, we have a lot of books. Alex has done a lot of great work to post resources, more reading, terms to help you understand. We're going to go through the terms next week about cisgender and gender identity and sex assigned at birth. These terms that just express the worldview and scientific credence. We're going to go through that, but there's a lot of resources on the app. If you're not on the app, we'll get you on there. Beth?
It's interesting that you just mentioned terms and things, because what I'm wondering is, people arguing for this have to be tripping over their own vocabulary. Because, like the quote you had from the governor, we as grown-ups. Well, what the heck does that mean? And who says you should be making decisions for your kids? A grown-up must be less human than the little human.
Well, and some of you have seen the YouTube video with Matt Walsh, where he's talking with someone who's identifies as a transgender individual, a man who's wearing women's makeup and dress and everything. And he says to Matt Walsh, I wanted to be a woman. And Matt Walsh says, and tell me what is a woman? And he can't answer the question. And Matt Walsh just says, explain to me how you can't answer the one thing you always wanted to be.
Right.
You can't define your object or your
Chaos.
goal. They're tripping over their own language.
And then inventing new language to figure out how to explain the worldview.
Right. Makes me seasick.
I think there's something to that. It is, because there's no standard. I mean, you think about a child growing up in this world where they can't even know the basic idea of whether they're a boy or a girl. It will completely destabilize. You talk psychology, I'm no psychologist, but there's some pillars for children. Obviously for adults, some things we can cling to. Male, female is one of them. But if you can't cling to that, you're gonna be seasick. Part of that is the intentionality, the chaotic nature of the worldview. Katie?
Do they not look at studies and evidence as far as being able to draw conclusions on like the family structure being something that is actually positive in a child's life? Like, do they just throw out any studies? Like, because there's enough evidence over time.
It's a great question. Yes and no. Of course, as we politicize medicine, you can create a study for anything you want. And just, because studies are just a tool then of oppressing, right? That's biology, that's truth. Facts. You can just look down, you're a boy or a girl, but that's oppressive. So studies, no, when you believe so much in a worldview. So yes and no, they'll create studies, but then ignore them,
Well,
right?
this is part of critical theory too. Critical theory says there is objective reality, but objective reality is used as a tool of oppression because it's from the oppressor's perspective. So it's all about narrative. Do you remember, this is not a comment on issues of race in this country generally, but the BLM movement, do you remember the hashtag that was floating, tell your story, my narrative? That was because individual instances of subjective realities are supposed to trump objective data to create empathy. So that is an intentional move away from objective metrics to say that you must amplify the aberration to cause political revolution.
And BLM, I mean, just adding that in, you see, one of their primary tenets was to destroy the nuclear family. That wasn't an accident. It's because they're part of the worldview. Destroy the nuclear family is the way to create a free society.
So if there's no standard, but then you're creating a standard to address that problem, then you're not at no standard anymore. So the ultimate conclusion of that philosophy is just chaos. You can't impose anything.
It is chaos. It's Romans 1.
It's gonna destroy even things like marriage, because how do you know you're marrying a male or a female if you can't even tell what they were from birth?
Yeah.
Which is gonna mess up the whole family unit.
Gone. Yep, it's gone. We have to stop so I can get you into the sermon. The good news is we've got class next week. Come back for that. We're going to talk about then the trans movement, right, and how it is influencing culture and the different parts of the movement, including gender dysphoria, those who are actually suffering from real harm, but then goes to the political side. And then we'll have a fourth class on where we can just discuss and talk and apply. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Well done.